published it earlier this week, and the main findings were basically, according to them, institutional racism does not exist. And I've got like the list here of what they said. They said that most BAME children do as well or better than their white counterparts. Success in education has transformed British society over the last 50 years into one offering greater opportunities for all. They've said the pay gap between BAME individuals and the white British majority is only 2.3%. Diversity has increased in professions such as law and medicine. And what they did say is some communities continue to be haunted by historic racism, which is creating deep mistrust, and this could be a possible barrier to success. It concluded that the UK is not yet a post-racial country, whatever that means, but its success in removing race-based disparity in the education system and economy should be regarded as a model for other countries. And again, it claimed that the British system is no longer rigged against ethnic minorities, and that the UK is therefore not institutionally racist. Any thoughts, Simran?
It's just such a bold statement to make when a country like the one that we live in is so institutionally racist. It's so institutionally racist, outright racist in so many different ways. And I think also, especially the part where they're saying minorities or people of colour or BAME individuals, whatever you want to call it, are haunted by the past and are like using that as a barrier to their own success. That is essentially them saying it's a you problem.
Yeah, it's like proper gaslighting.
Yeah,
really,
that is.
it?
Yeah,
like,
you're right. Yeah. It is gaslighting. That is literally them saying, "No, we don't see a problem with it. There's absolutely no problem on our side of things."
Yeah, and this is the thing that actually like really irks me. Like, is you know how there's those and I'm not trying to compare the severity of these two situations, by the way. I'm just saying it's a similar sort of vibe. But you know, like those girls that will go on like Twitter and will like say something about like, you know how when it was all like, oh, hashtag not all men, and they'll jump on that and be like, yeah, like we need to like care, why are we saying all men, it's not all men, and it's like to do like pick me behavior. This is exactly the same thing that we see, and this like irks me so much when it's people of color who do it like basically to try and be like, oh, pick me, like well, it's also it's a bit shameful because a lot of these people are actually either in high positions or aspiring to get to high positions, and they think, right, the way to do this is to basically say whatever they want me to say, and I'll be your token person of color. Like, I don't mind, but like you know what I mean.
But that's selling yourself out.
Yeah.
And do you really want to do that for the sake of? Fair enough that you might get where you want to be, but think about where you've come from, everything that means. Like, you're, as a person of color living in this country, you have such a long line of like ancestry behind you that is so important, so rich, and so diverse. And you're betraying that really when you're going down that path and you're purposefully, you know, selling out. Being one of those like pick me, I guess isn't really the situation, but it is like in that respect, I suppose, where like if you were to say like, oh yeah, I guess it's not all like that. My experience hasn't been bad, so how does your experience represent the experience of every other, like all the other millions of people of color in the country?
It's just frustrating. I find like there's so many times on the show where I literally just end up making a load of random noises. This
is just half an hour of Carlos sighing.
Just again going back to the quite like serious topic. Again, we can't say to you like, look, you need to believe this, you need to believe that. So we're gonna now give you some stats, and you go away and think what you want to think with that. So in light of this Sewell Report, which has said the UK is not institutionally racist, let's start with education. And what we'll do is I'll read out the stats and we can just have like a little bit of a think about it afterwards. So In the past 5 years, UK schools recorded more than 60,000 incidents involving racism. 95% of black British youth have witnessed racist language at school, while 78% heard such at their workplace. Furthermore, 49% of young black people felt racism is their biggest barrier to attaining academic success, with 70% of black children feeling under pressure regarding their natural hair. In some British local authorities, exclusion rates are up to 6 times higher for black Caribbean students and 9 times higher for Roma pupils compared to white pupils. 56 out of 65 novels and plays across 3 major exam boards were written by white authors. Also, only 11% of GCSE students in 2019 studied modules that made any reference to the contribution of black people to British history. Finally, black students are actually more likely to get into higher education than their white counterparts. However, only 14% achieve first-class degrees compared to 30% of white people. So,
This is the thing. I think a lot of those things are outright not just institutionally racist, but they highlight the institutional infrastructures behind them that are inherently racist. For example, the curriculum, what you said about, I think you said 65 out of 66 books to be analysed.
56 out of 65,
Sorry,
yeah.
were to be analysed that were all by white authors and not by non-white authors. That's shocking. That's just like the first stepping stone into which the curriculum has become whitewashed. I remember sitting in school in history classes learning about colonisation, thinking, this is a load of, like, because what I hear about it, because it wasn't long ago, what I hear about it is so different to what I get taught about it in the history books. And then, like you said, there's no looking of the contribution of like black people to history or any other like minority or minority group to history. I've never learnt about, like all the scientific inventions that come from like the Middle East. That's never happened. I learned about this kind of stuff from Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the thing, like, it's almost bad because you're kind of driven to find your information from arguably unreliable sources. Like, you know how we talked, like, obviously you're not a fan of Clubhouse in general. Like, it's kind of like, but then people are kind of driven to that because they're not actually taught the reality of stuff in school, which is where you should actually be learning all this stuff. Like, I find it interesting to say, oh yeah, the way I was taught about colonization in school is rubbish. Like, I didn't even get taught about that, you know what I mean? Like, the most like we got taught was, like, it was always, like, civil rights movement in America. And it's like, well, what about here? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
very
it's not,
washed over.
Because in Britain, everything was just magically resolved when slavery was abolished. Like, that's the way it happened.
It's not that we even learnt about colonization, it's that they just like touched on it for a couple of lessons in like geography here and there, because we had to talk about like superpowers and like globalization and stuff like that. So we were touched on colonization, and I remember I did a huge coursework on it. I read so many books, literally it was like gold standard work. This was not to toot my own horn.
Wow.
And I got like a D because it wasn't what the brief was, basically, which admittedly is probably my fault. Did get a bit carried away, but it wasn't basically what was right in terms of the mark schemes and stuff. But I was like, no, the information I compiled was like legit from so many different sources. But because they weren't the sources that we were given to use, my mark was rubbish.
That
I remember being fuming when I got that back.
I'm fuming right now, like, listening to that, like, ugh.
It's just the whitewashing of the curriculum, and that's how it starts. It's these infrastructures that are in place in our society that from the beginning of time have started as whitewashed. And there was no leeway for allowing the voices of any other group to be heard. Therefore, you get to a place like this where that whitewashing of everything in our society, not just curriculums, is so in the past, it's so not at the forefront of where our thinking's at. It makes it seem like the UK is not institutionally racist.
And then we I think millions of people signed that petition to Gavin Williamson last summer to like ask, can we please just have a rethinking of the national curriculum? To which
I think I signed it.
Yeah, and to think that he, as a white cis man, like responded back to it saying, nah, it's fine.
No.
Yeah, just no.
You're okay.
Like, this is right. We're gonna get too caught up in this, so I'm just gonna move on to the next series of stats. So this is regarding health and COVID in general. The risk of death from COVID was twice as high for black men compared to white men, and 1.4 times higher for black women compared to
Wow.
white women. South Asian people were 20% more likely to die in hospital from COVID than their white counterparts. 95% of the doctors who've died from COVID were people of colour. The Lawrence Review revealed that BAME individuals have been overexposed to COVID as a result of being overrepresented in industries which don't allow them to work from home, as well as living in overcrowded housing. Black women are 4 to 5 times more likely to die during pregnancy compared to white women. For mixed race women, the risk is threefold, and for Asian women, it's double.
Wow.
Furthermore, black babies have a 121% increased chance of being stillborn compared to white babies born in the same hospital, and a
Goodness.
50% increased chance of dying within their first 28 days of life.
That is harrowing. That
And-
is insane.
I'm sure there's some people out there who are kind of thinking, well, yeah, but it's just genetics, isn't it? Like, but then it's like, even if you were going to argue and bring stats that actually showed that, why is nothing being done about it? You know what I mean?
Where our NHS stands, where modern medicine stands, they're both incredible at the moment. 2021, like we are so advanced in that technology. Even if it was a genetic thing that there was like a racialized difference between rates of being stillborn or rates of surviving COVID or rates of suffering a long-term chronic illness, for example, surely medicine would have caught up to that. And why that shows that the UK is institutionally racist is because our medicine and our technology hasn't, and they haven't bothered to. And there was a whole thing of like, they surveyed nurses and doctors and they said they were taught that like people of colour, especially black women, felt pain less. They were under that impression that they felt less pain, so they were less likely to receive painkillers or epidural during childbirth, which resulted in more traumatic birth experiences, more like physical trauma during the birth, more emotional trauma during the birth. Like, it's incredible the amount of stuff that just gets washed over because of the way it's been taught.
Yeah, and I've seen some stuff before about like various symptoms which are involve the way that things look, and I know that people of colour have maybe come in and have shown this to their doctors, and they've just said, oh no, it's fine, because they can't see it, because on white skin, the way things look, it's a lot more stark, there's a lot more comparison.
And that's what's in the medical textbook as well, don't forget, is a like a white skin, say with psoriasis or eczema or any kind of condition, that's how the doctors have been taught to recognize a certain condition. So when I come in with brown skin or someone comes in with black skin, then that doctor can't tell the difference. They can't discern that that's X condition or Y condition or no condition at all, so they're more likely to receive no diagnosis.
It comes back to the fact of I know a lot of people kicked off like it was literally Halima's first show, shock horror, but like when she was saying like about how British people don't believe that they're racist, and everyone kicked off like, oh, how can you say Britain's racist, this, that, the other. People don't realise that racism isn't just going up to someone or harbouring views towards a certain race and like making them known. Like, that's not just what racism is. Racism can be non-intentional because it can be structural, which is what we're talking about. Institutional racism, systemic racism, it's racism that is embedded within society and the structures of society, and obviously it's not going away anytime soon if people aren't doing anything
I
about
would say
it.
on 3 levels racism exists on this country. Number 1 is outright racism, you know, your hate crimes, you're getting called a slur in the street or anything of the sort. I can tell you firsthand that exists. I got called a slur a month ago. Yeah, about a month ago in the Asda car park. You know? Like, it's just crazy. I would say on a slightly smaller level, you have your microaggressions, which is the stuff like, say, for example, black women feeling that they didn't receive a job role or because of the type of hair that they have or the hairstyle that their hair is in that has been deemed unprofessional. I know there was a big issues in schools of a lot of people saying that afro textured hair is unprofessional. Obviously it's not, it's just texture of the hair, and there's nothing you can do about that. And then I'd say on an even bigger level you have your institutional, your structural racism, and I think at all 3 levels that is very much present and rife in this country.
Getting back to the stats, wealth and economy. On average, white British individuals hold the highest wealth in Britain per adult at 197,000 per adult. Black African individuals on average hold the lowest wealth in Britain. This falls at 24,000 family wealth per adult, which is under 1/8 of the typical wealth held by a white British household. Whilst 1 in 10 white households live in poverty in the UK, this is the case for 1 in 5 black households. The stats are worse for Asian households, with 1 in 4 living in poverty. Furthermore, government policy decisions, such as the benefit cap, removal of child poverty targets, etc., have arguably unequally impacted black, Bangladeshi, and Pakistani households. On average, black graduates earn 23.1% less than their white counterparts. Rates of COVID unemployment were twice as high for BAME people compared to white people. Whilst black workers face a 13.8% unemployment rate, this is more than 3 times the rate of employment for white people. And finally, 1 in 10 women of colour were put out of work by COVID, and the overall BAME unemployment rate rose from 5.8% to 9.5% during the pandemic. So basically, if you're a person of colour, chances are you're either being put out of work or you're being forced to go on the front line and literally
And that does nothing but highlight an institutional and infrastructural problem that we have, because the fact that what are the barriers in place for people of colour that they only have the option to go into such jobs like that, like frontline working jobs. And I was going to say, like, the fact that poverty exists in this country, full stop, forget race for a second. The fact that poverty exists in a country like this that is so prideful on how developed we are, how amazing our NHS is, like how, first world, I know you're not supposed to say that anymore, but like, that kind of classification, if we're going to go along with that, if we're going along with this Pride of Britain thing, the fact that poverty exists in the first place highlights the institutional problem that we have. It's infrastructural, it's structural, it's societal on all levels. That's a massive problem, the fact that that even exists in the first place. So the fact that we have that existing as a problem, and then the disparities that we have between white people and non-white people within that just only highlight that at some level, I just don't understand how you can turn your nose up to the fact that racism doesn't exist. Like,
running a bit out of time now, so I'm just thinking the final stats are in relation to policing and the criminal justice system. So black people are over 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people, despite evidence of the disproportionate way in which stop and search policies have been used against black people. The government has consistently increased its use. Black people are over 3 times more likely to be detained than white people. Young black people are 9 times more likely to be imprisoned than their white counterparts. Despite black people making up under 4% of the UK population, over the last 5 years, over 12% of the tasers used by police were in situations involving black people. And I think this was probably the stat that worried me the most, was that for BAME children, they're 3 times more likely to have a taser used against them than white children. First of all, why are you using a taser against children in the first place? Over the last 10 years, 164 people have died in or following police custody in England and Wales, though according to the 2011 census, black people account for, like I said, less than 4% of the population. They accounted for a disproportionate 8% of these deaths. 97% of the reports of police racism face no action. In the past 5 years, 5,000 complaints were made to police in England and Wales, with only 153 being upheld. Looking at the Met Police in particular, 98% of the 1,368 allegations made against their staff were dismissed. The Lamy Review concluded that BAME individuals still face bias and discrimination at the hands of this criminal justice system. Although, like I said, black people make up 4% of the population, they make up 12% of the prison population, and 27% of the prison population is BAME, despite only 14% of the UK population being BAME. Following this review, the government vowed to look carefully into the 35 recommendations made, and then 4 years later came back and claimed that institutional racism doesn't exist. The Met Police has also been known to over-release crimes to the media. So when a black person is sentenced, 29% of the people being sentenced are black, yet 44% of the crimes are released to the media, and they're known to under-release crimes when a white person is sentenced. So they make up 45% of those sentenced, but 33% of those are released to the media. And this is... yeah. There we go, guys. So again, like, we're not allowed to like say, you need to think this, you need to think that, like, and I don't think we should be allowed to say that because you should be able to make your own informed decisions. But listening to those stats, I don't really understand how you can argue that it doesn't.
No.
And I'm kind of like, I think the Sewell report was like 9 people. And the thing is, I think, going back to what we were talking about before, I think a lot of them were people of colour. And I'm just a bit like,
Don't sell out for your race, man.
yeah, and also like, what, like, literally, what? Like, and it kind of diminishes the effect of doing these reports, because if they're going to release that report and those statements, and people can very easily, like me, like, yes, I've like had like a privileged education, etc., and I'm higher educated, but I can easily go away and find these facts and put it forward. Like you've been put in this position specifically, you're trained to do this report. Like, it kind of makes the whole system just seemed a bit rigged. I don't know.
Well, the system is rigged. We all know that. I just think
Allegedly.
you can't take the experience of 9 individuals that are willing to sell out. Let's be honest, and put that at the forefront to make such a wild statement to say that the UK is not institutionally racist. That absolutely devalues and just nullifies the experience of every person of colour in this country, who I can't tell you one person that hasn't experienced at least a microaggression of some sort, or if not a flat out hate crime. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is the thing when you were talking before about the levels of racism. I think like there's levels to everything, but what's wrong is when people try to it just becomes a thing where it's sort of like oh, was it racism or was it covert racism? Why does that matter? If it's racism,
Still
it's racism. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh dear.
That's the thing about microaggressions that annoys me, that I kind of, before it had a label as microaggressions, I'd say a few years ago, experiencing them growing up, it'd be like one of those things where you can't speak out about it, because if you do, you sound crazy.
Yeah, and it's like there's been people that have been saying this stuff for ages, and I don't know what it is, this like kind of shift in this social awareness, maybe, I don't know, but for some reason people are actually recognizing it, and it's what's the word? Is it gaslighting, when you've been saying it for ages and people weren't taking you seriously, and now suddenly, like,
I'd say it's a form of gaslighting. Yeah, I'll tell you what is definitely gaslighting, like you said earlier, is them saying, you guys saying that the UK is institutionally racist is a barrier to your own progression, and you're deluded for thinking that. That's a joke.
I think as well, it's like, why is it always like on like the what they call the breakfast TV shows?
Yeah.
It's always a group of white people
Well,
debating
they know their
whether
demographic. This is the thing. They know their viewership, so they're just pandering to their audience, I suppose.
But there's like, why are a group of white people discussing whether racism exists? The whole definition of racism is that it involves a power dynamic. And just like we live in a patriarchal society, we live in a white-dominated, white power supreme society. Like that, it's just fact. And so therefore, like, white people can't talk about racism. Like, I'm sorry, like, yes, you can have your opinions, and yes, I'm looking at the camera now, I'm not trying to like cut off your free speech or anything, but think, if you're white, why do you want to talk about racism? Like, you need to listen, not talk, please. Thank you. Right. And on
Period.
that note, yeah. Right. Okay.